The new Dragon of Dirge Hologram is the latest hologram to be added with the 2.2 update. Dirge was one of the two Renacita bosses I was looking forward to getting a hologram challenge, with the other one being Lorelei. So I was pretty happy when they announced it and basically jumped straight in. So in this video, I want to go over Dirge's attacks, then have a general discussion about the boss, including its issues, some tips and strategies that I found, and finally my overall thoughts on the fight. So let's get started with his attacks. Now, this part of the video can be pretty boring, so unless you'd like to learn his attack combos with a visual representation, I'll have timestamps so you can skip this part of the video. Some things before we start, I'm going to refer to these as fire bombs. These are ground eruptions. These are thorns. These are spinning blade wheels, which I'll call spinners. And these are spikes. Spikes will start off blue, but will flash orange after a period of time, shortly before erupting out of the ground. These can prematurely be triggered by stepping on the spike, so throughout the fight, be sure to keep an eye out for if you accidentally trigger one early. Now, Dragon of Dirge has two phases with some pretty noticeable combo differences. However, it also has two different modes. Normal mode, which the boss will start the fight in, and inflamed or enraged mode, where Dirge will have fire emanating from their chest and other parts of their body. We're going to talk about the enraged mode first because it's relevant for the rest of the fight. While the boss is enraged, certain attacks will trigger an extra enrage attack. This extra enrage attack is typically a single ground eruption and a single extra spike. The way the boss becomes enraged is by doing what I'll call his enrage combo. This starts with a delayed bite attack, followed by a claw slam, then a claw swipe, then a left arm claw ground slash that sends out a wave of damage in a line, followed by a big claw slam, and then large AoE ground eruption attack. This attack is pretty easy to spot and react to, just don't panic dodge too quickly after the bite, as the claw slam is slightly delayed, and for the final big claw slam, look for the arm moving down to time your dodge, and then wait for the boss to start a push animation to dodge the eruption. But with that out of the way, let's get started with the rest of his attacks. The first attack the boss will do when spawning is the Fire Bombardment, where it will do a scream causing 10 fire bombs to fall from the sky down to the ground. Now, these do aim at the player's location, however they won't all aim directly at the player. They do have a pattern though. This attack can also happen during the fight, and if the boss is enraged, this will end the enraged mode. The next attack, the boss will raise its right claw before slamming it down to the ground and spawning 3 spike waves that travel outwards from the point of impact. If the boss is enraged, this will do an enrage attack after the claw slam. This attack can also have a follow-up slash that will have the boss reach across before raking its claw along the ground in an area in front of it. From here, this can trigger 2 different attacks. The first will shoot out thorns in an area in front of it, while spawning 5 spikes along where the claw swiped. The second version will have 3 spinners pop out of the ground that will do damage as they fall back down, and as Dirge launches backwards into the air, will all shoot quickly in the player's direction. Dirge will then do a parryable swoop attack, which is followed by a wing attack, launching thorns in a medium range in front of itself. If the boss is enraged, this combo is unique from the other variants and doesn't trigger the enrage attack with the initial claw slam. A few things to mention about the parryable swoop attack. There are a few ways the boss can do this attack during the fight, but all of them will immediately end the attack combo if parried. However, they can also hit you through a successful parry attempt, so just be careful when trying to parry this attack. The next attack that he can do is reaching across with his right claw and raking it along the ground, shooting out thorns and immediately doing a spin that will also shoot out thorns. This is then followed by a claw slam spawning 4 spikes around the player. When enraged, the final claw slam will trigger an enraged attack. Another attack that he can do is lifting his left claw and slamming it into the ground, spawning 4 spikes to the left and the right of the player. If the boss is enraged, the claw slam will trigger the enraged attack. This attack also has a short distance gap closer variant that will start with Dirge speeding up towards the player before slamming its claw. However, this attack is very hit and miss with its accuracy and can just randomly miss sometimes. There is another attack that looks similar to the left claw slam, but in this attack, the left claw will strike quicker and spawn 5 spinners that shoot out of the ground before quickly following this up with a right claw slam and the spinners shooting outwards when they've hit the ground. When enraged, the enraged attack will trigger after the second claw slam. For the next attack, he will reach across with his left claw before raking it along the ground and sending out thorns. This can be the end of the attack, or it can be followed up with a very delayed right claw rake that shoots out thorns before doing a right claw slam spawning thorns. When enraged, the last claw slam will trigger the enraged attack. The next attack that he can do is a charge attack, where it will lift its head and right arm before quickly charging towards the player in a straight line, slamming its front claws into the ground along the way. This normally only requires one dodge to avoid the damage and will typically charge over the player without pushing them around. But if you somehow end up in front of him after a dodge, be sure to dodge again, as the claw slams can hit you after a successful dodge. And if the attack misses somehow, be very careful getting into melee range before it's over, as the attack has a rather large hitbox and can hit players behind the attack. The next attack will have him lift his head and left arm before doing a fire breath attack towards the ground in a large AoE. This attack can be dodged, and during the animation, any attacks or counterattacks will target the right arm. The attack will last for roughly 6 dodges, however this can depend on the character you're using. For the next attack, Dirge will fly up into the air, hovering for a moment before doing a body slam down to the ground and shooting out thorns in multiple directions. When enraged, the body slam will be followed by 2 ground eruptions. There is a second version of this attack, where if you're at a medium distance, Dirge will fly up and do the parryable swoop, followed by the wing thorn attack. The next attack will be triggered if you're behind the boss, where it will do a 180-degree tail swipe on the side the player is on. This will send out thorns on the side the tail swipes. Lastly, let's talk about some of its long-range combos. The first combo is a fire breath attack, where it will breathe fire along the ground in a cone from right to left before 2 homing thorn volleys attack the player, and also spawn slow-moving orbs that travel in a straight line. The second ranged attack he has will have him do a scream, spawning 2 sets of flame pillars that attack the area around the player. And the last long ranged attack is a triple laser attack, where the middle laser hits along the ground in a straight line, and the left and right lasers slowly move towards the center, where they eventually cross over. This can typically be dealt with by one dodge where they converge. However, if you happen to be close to a laser before they converge, be sure to dodge twice. While enraged, this attack gets a unique enraged attack, spawning multiple spikes around the player. The last attack Dirge has is a reposition attack, where he will quickly fly in a direction while continuing to face the player, before doing a ground slam and sending out a ranged wave attack towards the player. This attack can immediately be followed up by any of the other attacks in Dirge's Phase 1 arsenal. However, if you're close enough and he's not enraged, it will typically do the enrage combo. These attacks will trigger somewhat randomly until the boss's health reaches 50%, which will have it do a Phase 2 transition attack combo. At the start of this combo, Dirge will refill its vibration bar to full before flying away and disappearing. Flame pillars will then spawn around the circle in the middle of the arena and create a large flame tornado that gradually pulls the player towards the center. After this finishes, Dirge will spawn in the middle of the arena and send out a homing meteor shower, after which he will do a dive bomb attack, slamming down to the ground towards the player before standing up and doing a large AoE scream attack. This is the start of Phase 2. Throughout Phase 2, the boss can do most, if not all, of the attacks it could in Phase 1, but every attack will be the enraged version. However, it also has some unique teleporting combos it will do in Phase 2, which are the most common attacks to see in this phase. Now, I'm not going to mention every time the boss teleports during these combos because he does it a lot, so I'll leave that for the video demonstration. The first Phase 2 combo will start with the Fire Bombardment attack, after which a round of flame pillars will trigger. Floating thorns will then spin around the player before flashing and shooting down, followed by the boss doing a scream where 2 sets of 5 spinners will land on the ground and quickly move towards the player. Dirge will then spawn in the air, doing a quick parryable swoop attack, which is followed by a wing thorn attack. The second Phase 2 combo will have the boss do the beginning of the bite attack from the enrage combo, but will teleport away instead. He will then do a claw slam, spawning 4 spikes that trigger fairly quickly, followed by a delayed claw slash and ranged wave attack. The boss will then do a slash and spin attack, shooting 2 waves of thorns, before doing the same attack again, just spinning the opposite direction, which is followed by a claw slam with an eruption attack and 5 spikes. This is finally followed by a flying body slam. Something to mention about the spikes before the body slam, these will shoot out thorns just before they erupt from the ground. So if you notice yourself randomly taking damage and you can't find out from where the damage came from, these little shits are likely the reason. The third phase 2 combo will have the boss launch into the air before appearing on the left side to do a claw slash. He will then do a parryable big claw slam. If this isn't parried, 5 spikes that are primed to erupt will spawn under the player, followed by 3 spinners landing on the ground, where Dirge will reappear doing a claw slam, shooting the spinners outwards in a cone, while spawning 3 spike waves, an eruption, and a spike. During this combo, if the parryable claw slam is parried, this will start a different combo leading into a parryable charge attack. If the charge isn't parried, this will be followed by 1 round of flame pillars and finally by a wing attack. However, if the charge is parried, this will immediately immobilize the boss, making this a very good combo to take advantage of. Another phase 2 attack Dirge has is an attack that will start in a similar way to the phase 2 transition attack, where he'll fly up and move towards the center of the arena, but instead of disappearing, he will quickly land, spawning 3 spinners and do a spin attack, sending each of the spinners quickly shooting towards the player in quick succession. This attack is not only really rare, but it seems rather simple to the point where I thought it might also be a phase 1 attack, but I never saw it, so I'm a bit unsure if this is unique to phase 2 or not. The last move Dirge has is also his most complicated one, and from my experience, it seems to only trigger when Dirge has about 10% health remaining. It will start with a left claw rake attack spawning thorns, into a quick right claw rake spawning thorns, before disappearing and reappearing to do a quick claw slam and claw swipe. This is followed by a round of flame pillars, which is quickly followed by a tantrum combo before disappearing. A single firebomb will then fall from the sky, spawning 6 spinners in a circle that shoot outwards upon landing. Dirge reappears immediately doing a charge attack before disappearing, quickly reappearing to do a parryable swoop attack before doing the homing meteor shower attack, followed by the dive bomb attack, and finally by the large AoE scream attack. This combo is basically his last ditch effort to kill you before you finally beat him. There are 2 things with this combo that I want to mention. The firebomb that spawns the spinners in the middle of the combo doesn't let you perform a perfect dodge, at least I couldn't get it to do it, but if you dodge towards it, you can dodge both the spinners and the following charge attack. The parryable swoop towards the end of the combo doesn't have a follow-up and will end the combo. However, just be warned that it can hit you through a parry attempt, so don't get too greedy and try to keep yourself safe. This basically sums up the fight, at least with my current knowledge. So what are my thoughts on the new hologram? I like big bosses.
Well, hello.
This fight makes me think of Nergigante from Monster Hunter World because of the thorns, with a little bit of Bahamut from Final Fantasy, making it a very interesting mix of the two. However, it also feels pretty unique with how it disappears and reappears during Phase 2, making it feel like you're fighting a ghost. So I personally quite liked the fight, but it does have some issues that I didn't like, such as the Fire Breath AoE attack and the disappearing combos in Phase 2 will break lock-on. This isn't a big deal, but I really don't like mechanics that break lock-on in general, let alone do it constantly in the second harder phase of the fight. Some attacks such as the Bombardment, the Fire Breath, and the Scream attack can hit you through your iframes if you dodge counter too frequently. It's nowhere near as bad as Hecate's Spin attack from her Phase 2, but it's still kind of annoying. The damage from the charge attack hits almost immediately at the start of the charge animation, making this something that you just have to get used to dodging. Somewhat on that note, there are multiple instances throughout the fight where almost identical looking attacks will behave differently based on the enrage, phase, and attack combo, making this a very knowledge-based fight. Visual indicators for some attacks can be very hard to see if you get close to the edge of the arena, as the floor can get this dark cloudy texture that will cover the ground effects. This is more of a problem with the arena itself, as Sentry had a similar issue, which made ground effects next to impossible to see, so I really hope that they fix this going forward. The parryable swoop attack can not only hit you through a parry attempt, but it can also have the damage linger and hit the player well and truly after a successful parry. And last, I had some issues issues with the camera when the boss would spawn at the start of the fight, where you wouldn't be able to see what was going on, and because the bombardment actually slows down time slightly, it's a lot harder to dodge attacks that you can't see based off muscle memory when the regular dodge timing has been changed. Luckily, this occurs at the beginning of the fight, so it's not a problem that's going to stuff you over when you've nearly beaten the boss. I'm sure it has some other issues, but these are the ones that I noticed. So if you're struggling with the fight, I have some tips that might be useful. For the parryable swoop attacks and the parryable charge in phase 2, rather than trying to outright parry the attack, you can dodge backwards with the attack to get the iframes while trying to get in front of it, and then dodge counter to parry the attack. This can be really useful to avoid damage going through the parry attempt, so dodging and using your dodge counter to parry will almost guarantee you stay safe while getting an attempt to parry at the same time. Next, take advantage of the hologram stage modifiers and pick a main DPS with good dodge counter capabilities. This isn't necessary, but it can determine what attacks you need to worry about and how much of this boss's mechanics you need to know. If you have Carlotta or Camellia, both of these characters perform very well against this boss for different reasons. Carlotta is insanely good at parrying this boss's attacks, sometimes well and truly before you should be able to, and Camellia has a fantastic dodge counter that helps avoid a lot of the enraged follow-up attacks. Phoebe and Danjin also perform very well, but Danjin can die very quickly to one of the many different extra attacks, and Phoebe's great, but you'll likely struggle to see what you're trying to avoid, as she's basically this game's version of Live Flashbang. Characters I would assume would do pretty well against this boss are Cantarella and Rochia, because one of the hologram modifiers involves the Lorelei Echo. This echo will make you immune to all damage while transformed, will reduce Dirge's vibration by about 10% if you get hit by an attack during the transformation, and after casting, the whole team gains 20% fusion resistance for 15 seconds. This can be a massive benefit to the fight, so if you have either of these characters, I would recommend taking advantage of this if you're struggling to beat it. Now, technically any character could just equip this echo and get the same result, but unless you're okay with sacrificing your set for utility, or you're running two 2-piece sets already, this benefit will likely only be for these two characters, and unfortunately I don't have either of them to test out its value.
If you're a broke boy, just say so.
If you would like a challenge though, characters like Shang Liao and Baizha are not as great against this hologram, as they require better timing to get the most out of their iframes while dodging certain attacks. Speaking of dodging, some of Dirge's attacks like the Bombardment attack, AoE Fire Breath and the Scream attack are better suited to slower, deliberate dodges as opposed to dodge spamming. Like we talked about when mentioning issues the fight has, these attacks can ignore your iframes if you dodge too frequently. So if you slow down how fast you dodge and let the iframes do the heavy lifting for you, you'll likely find more success with avoiding damage. There are a fair few attacks in this fight that can be avoided by movement alone. However, this can be a blessing for some attacks, but a curse for others. If you play similar to myself and will try to dodge again if you don't get a perfect dodge the first time, with certain attacks you might accidentally dodge lock yourself, leaving you vulnerable for a follow-up attack. There are a few ways that you can deal with being dodge locked, but if you want to try and consistently dodge attacks, try to dodge in the direction the attack is coming from, with some good examples being the Bombardment, the Rake attacks, the left claw swipe that spawns a wave, the homing thorns from the long-range fire breath, and the homing meteor shower. If you get Dirge to around the 10% HP threshold, but you don't know if the next attack is the final combo or the regular delayed rake attack, try to only dodge once instead of double dashing. If it happens to be the regular combo and you quickly dodge twice, you'll dodge lock yourself and likely screw yourself over. However, if you double dodge out of habit, the options you have are move out of range of the rake. You can also use your liberation to give yourself iframes and then reset your dodges. And lastly, you can try to switch characters so you have another 2 dodges available. However, if you would rather look for a tell, it has a few that I was able to find, but one that I really like to look for, and that is the small winglet will touch the ground just before it's about to do the rake. Having said that, the better idea I would recommend is instead of waiting for the last 10% and then dealing with the combo, save up a bulk load of damage to burn through the last 10% as fast as you can. That way you won't have to deal with it, and better yet, if you can create a damage window for yourself by immobilizing the boss, this should be a lot easier to do. It's not exactly a super hard combo, but it will throw some curveballs at you if you're not used to it, so it's better to skip it if you can. When Dirge is doing the homing meteor shower, try not to be too close to the boss and instead gain some distance from the attack. This will give you a better view of the incoming attacks, making it easier to time your dodges correctly and react to any changes in the pattern. Also, make sure to pay attention to Dirge at the same time, as he can start the dive bomb attack while there are still homing attacks coming in. This next one isn't really a tip, but it can be helpful when it happens. There has been a few times where I've been able to skip the phase 2 transition attack by parrying an attack while the boss has less than 50% health. If you can do this, this will take the boss straight into phase 2. Lastly, while in phase 2, when the boss is about to start a teleport combo, try not to commit to any long duration liberations or buff windows. A lot of the teleport transitions don't allow Dirge to be hit while they're happening, which can not only waste massive amounts of damage, but will also generate less energy if whatever attack you're using misses the target. Overall, this was a rather enjoyable fight that doesn't really feel that hard, however it did feel more punishing to certain characters. It feels like a very knowledge-based fight that rewards patience, timing, and observation. The issues with the fight are all rather minor issues that don't really make it feel any worse than any of the other holograms. If I had to point out the worst thing about this fight, it would be because there's so many different things that you need to be paying attention to, it's easy to miss that one spike that you accidentally triggered. This can be made worse if you're using a character with super flashy animations like Phoebe, characters that have animation locks like Shang Liao, and if you hang around the edge of the arena, the effects at the edge of the arena can hide the indicator for certain attacks, making it much harder to pay attention to what is going on. So it's not perfect, but the issues are tolerable. So how does the Dragon of Dirge rank against the other holograms? If you have a full team, Dragon of Dirge definitely competes with Fallacy, who is my current pick for hardest hologram for a full team. My reasoning for giving it to Fallacy in the first place was the amount of attacks and frequency of attacks that can quickly kill a full team. I think Dragon of Dirge does a similar job in a different way, with slightly lower damage output, but more frequent attacks that can trigger even more attacks. Having said that, it seems to have less health than Fallacy, making it much easier to kill, and the fact that you can run the Lorelei Echo to tank attacks, reduce vibration, and gain fusion resistance, I'm not willing to take the crown off Fallacy. But I will say, I think they are in a similar difficulty tier. They're both challenging fights for full teams, but they are challenging for different reasons. But in terms of difficulty for solo players, in my opinion, Inferno Rider is still the hardest and most annoying to solo, with Hecate being close behind or even a little bit harder for some melee characters. Dragon of Dirge doesn't really compete with either of them, and it feels like it's on a similar level of difficulty to Sentry. I would say Dirge is harder just because of how complex the final combo is, however the HP threshold to trigger it is way too low. In my first clear with Danjin, I was able to beat the fight without even learning that that attack existed. Then I soloed the fight with Carlotta, where I only saw the first part of the combo. Then I soloed the fight with Camellia, who yet again didn't see the combo at all. Then I beat the fight with Phoebe, who took the longest, and I still didn't see the combo trigger. I had to wait until I was intentionally trying not to kill the boss so that I could learn all of its moves for me to see the full combo. So long story short, the final combo would make the fight more difficult than Sentry, at least in my opinion, if it wasn't so easy to avoid and unlikely to trigger. Having said that, this is just my experience with Dragon of Dirge, and I'm sure I didn't find everything to learn in the fight, but this amount of knowledge was more than enough for me to be able to beat the fight without too many problems. If there was anything that I missed or strategies that you've learned from your experience with the fight, feel free to let us know down in the comments. But that will do it for the video, so I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you're able to get something useful out of it. If you did, you can leave a like or a comment, and if you'd like to see more content in future, you can subscribe to the channel. But that will do it from me, so I hope to see you in the next video, and I'll catch you later.